Hey guys, John LaCorte with TRACT Optics. We're here at the range today and we're going to get ready to mount this scope, and we just want to talk a little bit about things you should try to avoid, mistakes. This is the way that we mount rifle scopes. It may not work for you. You might have your own way of doing it. That's fine. This is just our method that we've been very comfortable with, mounting a very large number of scopes over a very long period of time. But we're going to start off just kind of talking about some things that you really need to keep in mind when you're mounting the rifle scope. The first thing is how tight you make the screws. Whether it's the base, whether it's the rings, you always want to consult the optic manufacturer for their amount of torque they require. Some scopes have higher numbers, lower numbers. What we recommend is a maximum of 18 inch-pounds. That's going to hold the scope properly no matter what cartridge you're shooting, and it's going to ensure that you're not compressing the tube, which can affect the erector assembly inside the scope. You know, very often people will say, hey, my scope doesn't hold zero, or my scope doesn't track properly. In our experience, almost all of the time, a very high percentage, is that the rings are too tight and it's compressing the tube. And that's why you won't have the performance that you're supposed to have out of the scope. So make sure you never want to tighten the scope rings more than 18 inch-pounds. The base is something that's completely different. The base, actually, we tighten to 25 inch-pounds. And when we're using the base in either Picatinny rail fashion or a Weaver two-piece, we use just a drop of blue Loctite on those threads to hold those screws in place. We do not use Loctite on any other screws other than the base screws. Now, the screws that attach the ring to the base, again, you want to consult the manufacturer of the rings on that, but we see that 25 inch-pounds seems to be the magic number for tightening the rings to the base. Some things to keep in mind is there's usually a little bit of play in the ring. These Picatinny slots, while they're consistent, in the case of the MDT rings that we use here, they have double screws, so they fit two slots. What you just want to make sure is that the ring is always pushed toward the muzzle of the rifle when you tighten it. The scope itself is going to have a tendency of moving forward as the gun recoils. So if there's a little bit of gap, you want the ring to always be pushed as far forward as possible. Then you want to make sure that you're evenly tightening the screws. And I can't stress how important that is on your base screws and your screws that are the ring tops. It's just, I think, natural human tendency to try to tighten things as tight as you can get them. That's not the way you want to think about it when you're installing a rifle scope. If you over tighten these type of screws, it can cause more problems, and it's very important. I like to use a torque wrench. I do most of my work with just a standard, screwdriver, but then when I get to the point where the screws are snug, I move to a torque wrench. I like the Capri Tools wrench. It's basically a professional grade wrench that allows you to go well below 10 pounds all the way up to 50. So it can be used for a multitude of screws on the rifle, not only your scope mounting, your action screws and all of that stuff. Another thing is you want to keep in mind is the type of bit that you use to tighten is very important. You want hollow ground bits. This happens to be the Real Avid toolkit that we offer. You've got just about every size bit, from Torx to, say in metric. You've got flathead, Phillips, pretty much everything you need. But you got to make sure that the actual bit that you're using fits the screw perfectly. Any type of a wiggle room in there can cause you to strip the screw. You don't want that to happen. That can cause even more problems. So in a situation like this, I don't tighten one ring and then the other. I actually tighten them a little bit each. So that kind of makes sure that I'm not putting too much pressure on one ring versus the other. And then when I take the tops off, I settle the scope in. These MDT rings have a special design that I really like. One of the problems over the years that I've noticed myself is that trying to get a standard a ring top evenly, screwed down it's not easy. What's really cool about the MDT rings is you actually tighten one side and then tighten the other. So you don't have a gap on one side and you have a small gap on the other. It just makes it so much easier, because trying to make sure that the gap is even on other rings, it just becomes harder and harder. And again, it's that same situation. If that ring top is not screwed down perfectly, it's going to put pressure on one side of the tube and not the other. And again, you could have problems with your erector, which is going to affect the ability to scope the hole zero. It's going to affect the ability for that scope to track.